one highlights a person making $1 million, $2 million a year, bootstrapped, owns 100% of the company. No one looks at that and says, oh my God, look at this guy. Look at what he's doing, right?
There is a new NDA called One NDA, and it is a kind of open source, fully agreed upon one. That's great if you just need something. Then for actual, founder discussion.
When you think about NDAs, IP, think about, let's say someone did violate this agreement. Are you going to go sue them?
I'm a corporate attorney, not a litigator.
Yeah.
And so all of our job is, as a corporate attorney, is deterring those kind of actions. I hate the words high growth.
Yeah.
High growth just means in the VC game. No, we should be caring about the business that's actually being created.
What's one thing that founders get wrong more often than you would like for it to happen? Hey guys, welcome back to Funds and Founders. Today we have on Dean. Dean has an extensive history with esports, commentating, playing, as well as being in the law field and working with a bunch of startups. You were at a larger firm and you recently went, I don't know if freelancing is the right word, or sort of split off to start your own thing and work with startups, right?
Yeah. So I was originally at a tier 1 big law firm, did that for a couple of years, moved to a boutique, and then really identified the points that I was working with a lot of founders and seeing where the law model really fights against them and what they needed. And so I took my clients and went solo.
Nice.
And have been
Solo
really,
was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, and really dedicating my time and how I practice to fully slot into how they can pay for it and how I can plug into their companies.
Nice. And retention on YouTube is really low. So why don't you plug everything now? What kind of startups should reach out to you? Who are you looking to work with? And we'll plug again at the end, but I just want to make sure people know.
Yeah. So my full name's Dean Elazab. I have elazablegal.com. So ELAZAB.
Nice.
Legal.com. And so I really work with people from formulation, I have an idea, all the way through their financings, bringing people in and whatnot. So
Nice.
One of the big things I do is if you are in the spot where you're about to incorporate or even thinking of starting an entity, I will meet with you, tell you here's where I think you need me to come in, and come to me when you have this much money, then go off and build. Come back when you're going to do this, then go off. So I'm there to be there for you and
Nice.
not bill you every second while you know who I am. So
Nice.
you can. Some of my clients go 4 months without talking to me, and they get 0 bills during that time. So I really.
And the best way to reach out is your website.
Yes. So my website, and then my full name is just Dean Elazab, which should be somewhere. I'm thinking.
Yeah, and we'll link everything.
Yep.
Yeah,
And so everything else is just my full name. So Twitter,
sweet.
anything like that.
Sweet. To kick things off, one thing I want to understand, I think would be good for listeners to understand, is what is the right time to work with an attorney and bring someone in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so one of the things I tell people, and kind of what I just said with how it works, is it's hills and valleys for attorneys. When you're a much more established company, there's consistent legal work, but there really isn't when you're a startup. But there are incredibly important points where you need someone. So formation, when you're deciding, who's going to be founders, how the equity is going to be split, vesting, all those kind of things really need to happen with an attorney, because they need to walk you through, are you doing it correctly? Is there some creative way that you're trying to do this that is going to blow up? I've seen too many companies do the whole 50-50 thing down.
Vest on day one.
Fully vested day one, and 3 days later, they're like, I don't like this founder, all the way to someone trying to create the most complicated vesting schedule you've ever seen, right? So that's a big moment. And then as soon as you have anyone that isn't the founder looking into the company, be it an investor, an independent contractor, an employee, just anytime it's no longer that the founders can quietly reshuffle stuff around and no one sees it.
Okay.
That's where like the audit trail starts to become real.
Okay.
And so those are the kind of the biggest points where I say that I come in and can provide the most value.
Nice. And what's one horror story or one example that we can use to sort of understand why we should bring someone in and not just go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, draft me a document?
Yeah. So one of the best ones of that is really the founders who think everything's going to go great, right? Because the cognitive dissonance you have as a founder when you're going to start is that you're taking a huge risk, and you're taking a huge risk maybe with 1 or 2 other people. You feel like it has to go well because that's why you're doing it.
Yeah.
So your mentality at the start really shouldn't be, how are these other guys going to come after me, right? But what happens is if you try to equally split equity, all of a sudden, as soon as you get to the first conflict, you are really going to find out that you messed up there, right? So I've had terrible stories of someone getting 20 to 25% fully vested. They didn't even know what vesting schedules were. And then the person 3 months, 6 months in goes, I don't want to do this full time anymore. And you can't make me because I have the equity and I can go get another job. And I don't care, kick me off the board, kick me out, but like I have that. And that's really the big thing. So I would always tell people, like, that's the horror story of you need somebody who will come in and say, hey, look, I don't want y'all all to fall apart, but let's build this to where if everything goes well, you'll be right where you want to be. But if something goes wrong, it's built in there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And another way to also ask a similar question is, what's one thing that founders get wrong more often than you would like for it to happen?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is intellectual property, and that's a whole thing. But truly, you have to think of the company as a separate thing from you. So many founders think they're the product. And what I see is that they don't assign their intellectual property that they're working into the company, or maybe they bring in consultants, advisors, not on documents, and they're just asking people for feedback. They're asking people to, chip in. And then you get to the point where you have an investor come in and they have to say, the company owns all intellectual property that you are claiming the company is using. And if you can't make that representation, you're dead in the water. And I've had to help people chase consultants they had from a year ago because they didn't write an IP assignment and beg them for it. And now that person has all the leverage because now you need them. And now the thing that they worked on that was worthless back then now is meaningful. So that's one of the biggest things. I think people are pretty fast and loose when it comes to advisors and people chipping in, and they really need to be more protective than that.
Nice. And I don't want to get into like an IP rabbit hole, but very quickly, for someone who doesn't understand legal verbiage, what is IP? What should be considered IP? And if I'm building, and for sake of simplicity, let's say a tech company, what do I cover under that IP?
Yeah. So the big thing, as you're saying, that people get wrong is I think they have such a narrow focus on what they think the actual property is. Be it tech, they think it's just strictly the code, but it's not. It's what the product does. It's feedback, improvement, processes, anything. And so I had a client that what they do is they're doing a cosmetic that they brought in to a formulator, and they're like, hey, I'm already at like the red zone. I just need a few more things to get this product really going. Person works with them. They don't sign anything. Then
they launch their own brand.
All of a sudden, when they go to say, hey, well, you're going to give me the product and the process you did, they go, no, we won't. That's ours. We made it. And so all of a sudden, we are in the craziest impasse of what is the intellectual property? What did the person bring in? What did the person add to it, and how can we carve that out? As soon as you have to think about that, it's an impossible process.
Got it.
But if you had a very simple document that said anything you do when you work on this counts as ours, all of a sudden you don't have to worry about it because you just own everything. But that's the thing is I think a lot of people don't understand is it's not only this hard and fast code or the physical product, it is the process of making it, it is the ingredients, it is trade secrets of just how you put it together. So I think a lot of people need to realize when you bring in someone to even say like, hey, do you have simple, even in contract, simple feedback counts as IP and you have to have it assigned. If I have you sign an NDA to see how my company is and we talk about it for an hour, I technically can't go off and use what you said and build off of it.
Makes sense.
I need you to assign me that feedback.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I ask is I think sometimes I hear people trying to prevent growth and building their company because they add all these not artificial blockers, but they're like, oh my God, I'm scared of IP. I need you to sign this. And my perspective, so I run a software agency and we build software, right? And then my perspective is always in tech that no idea is truly defensible. I don't think that in tech an idea is truly defensible. So when I start working with founders who are delaying stuff because I'm not saying don't sign the agreement. I'm not saying I don't want to sign this, but I'm just saying you're spending weeks trying to defend IP that I don't really think is true IP. Like I don't know if I'm making sense.
I agree. So one of my favorite things that I do because I'm not at a law firm is I get to give people the productive middle answers. I'm not defending that I'm going to make your company a Fort Knox of IP because you can't afford that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that happens is some people get so defensive about the what ifs that they start actually delaying the actual growth of it, as you said.
Yeah.
And so I will tell people when they are over engineering things. And IP can be one where I agree. There can be a very simple 2-page NDA that you can run around, but hey, if someone doesn't want to sign it, don't do 8 revisions of it back and forth because at the end of the day, that's going to do nothing for you. So I've talked to some founders who are too restrictive and some that are too loose. It's all about finding that middle ground. But I agree with you that you need someone that tells you are harming the business by how much you're trying to protect it. Because if you protect something that's worth nothing.
100%. Yeah. It's the same argument I make when someone's like, oh, I don't want to dilute equity. I'm like, I would rather own 90% of something worth $1 million than own 100% of something worth 0.
Yes.
Right. And so I think when I hear people going, and especially if this is your first company, I'm not saying don't protect equity. I'm not saying don't over dilute. But what I'm saying is you add all these blockers, IP, NDA, this, that, to a product that technically hasn't even picked up, hasn't even gone to market, and so that's why I feel like it's good to understand, but also like you're saying, work with someone who will help you navigate accordingly based on your stage. If you go with too big a firm, too big a lawyer, too big an agency, you're now paying for things that you don't necessarily need to be paying for now. I'm not saying don't pay for them. At some point, 6-12 months, when you have a product, you're making money. Yes, at that point, pay for it. But until then, focus on making it work, getting it out there, making the money, the revenue, the customers, right?
Yeah. That's the thing I see is that like I've heard horrendous stories about people going to law firms and going, hey, my incorporation cost me $20,000. I'm like, this company might not ever make $20,000. And I'm sure that is the prettiest 4 documents you've ever seen in your life, but they didn't need them, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Like I help people with like 2-page MSAs into the 80-page. I know you see those public 80-page ones. You don't need it
100%.
in terms of service. Could you have custom ones? Sure. Could you just look at the largest competitor and copy those and then tweak them? Yes. Like it's all about finding the protections that are worth your budget. Because yes, if you burn your budget and your time on protecting and not building, then what are you protecting?
Yeah. And I think another way to look at that is also when you think about NDAs, IP, think about, let's say someone did violate this agreement. Are you going to go sue them? Are you going to go through the legal trouble of resolving whatever the situation is? Because I don't even know how much a lawsuit costs. Could be anywhere from $5K to $100. I have no context. And so are you even going to go through that process? Because if you're not, then again, what are you protecting? And so understanding those levers and being okay with the 2-page MSA, knowing that if you do need to go to court, maybe the 2-page is not going to help you the best way as an 80-page would. But the mental piece of, okay, let me start with this, and then as I grow, I add stuff, modify stuff, addendums and everything, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the big things that is I'm a corporate attorney, not a litigator.
Yeah.
And so all of our job is, as a corporate attorney, is deterring those kind of actions. But you're right. Once someone says, well, I'm going to do it anyway, come after me, it's hard in our legal system. Honestly, it's very hard to actually enforce these. It's very hard to go to court and get this done. And so, a lot of our business goes more on reputation and
makes sense.
Just being able to say that you don't break contracts than actually going after the person. So yeah, exactly. You don't need to do all this because especially if you're doing a contract for, $25,000 and less, no one's going to even look at you if they just steal that from you, but that might ruin that person's career.
Yeah.
So that's what you worry about.
Yeah, 100%. And pivoting a little bit, right? Let's say I'm an early startup. I have an idea. What's your recommendation on how do I go about doing the initial things? And if you have a recommendation of like dual formation, IP, whatever, what does that look like for me as an early stage founder? I'm a solo founder trying to build a tech company, right?
Yeah.
What are the initial things from a legal perspective that you would recommend this person look at?
So the biggest thing you do is you break yourself from the company. Even though it's basically you, the founder, you want these liabilities cut, right? Because if the company goes bankrupt, all this stuff like that. So that's why we do formations of entities. But most people do that and then they don't do the paperwork to actually make it exist, which is something like assigning your intellectual property into the company. That is something that is simple, but if you don't do it, then that company is technically not owning whatever it's doing, so it doesn't become a real corporation in that sense. Making sure you do the board, making sure you assign the actual shares to you. So many people do the certificate of formation that they're told on LegalZoom to send in and don't do the document where then they go and buy the shares they created. So now it's a company that no one owns as shares. And I've talked to people and they go, well, I started it, they're mine. I go, where? Where does it say that? And once again, all this stuff doesn't matter until it matters. And so it's either you're getting investors and third parties, or you start trying to rack up losses for tax benefits.
Yeah.
If you build a fake company that doesn't have any of the correct stuff, and then you try to tell the IRS that, hey, all my losses are racked onto this thing, they're going to say no very, very quickly. So those are kind of the real concerns, is that you want to make sure the company, as much as it feels silly, is being run by the books. And it's really not that much overhead. The formation really gets you started for that, but I think that's the biggest thing.
Are you comfortable saying a rough price range of what should this initial process cost? Give me a range, if you can, of this much to this much is how much you should be spending on this, right?
Yeah. I think $1,500 to $2,500 is where I am doing the professional level of not only doing the documents, because so many of these websites are telling you that they'll just spit them out, but you won't read them. And if you don't have a lawyer on your side that's read them, then you don't know what they say, right?
Yeah.
So they'll do it for a couple hundred, and then you can spend the 20 hours it takes to try to understand them. Or you have someone like me who will coach you through what that is. And one of the biggest things I do is really help them with, as we talked about, vesting and ownership percentages and all of that. So we do that, and then you are set. That's the range to really just be like, hey, look, I want to be able to take off. That's where I would say
Nice.
that.
Okay, cool. And then, so initial part of the journey, these are the couple things you said it covered. Rough price range, right? This person's building, they're doing stuff. And then you said the second inflection point is when there's a second party involved, right? Whether it's a founder, an employee, an investor, right? Is that the second part, that someone should bring someone in to look at stuff? Or is there something in between that you need to refer to professional legal advice to?
I think if it's a solo founder who's just building, no, they can kind of form the company and go into the garage and work, right? They'll probably be using third-party software, click-throughs. I don't need to look at any of that, right? But once you have someone coming to look at your stuff, yes. So I come back in, usually, so I give people at the start an NDA that I say you can run with and sign all you want. You need to worry about people coming in who want equity. This is the biggest thing, because advisors, consultants, employees, contractors, and we're in the founder space. So many people promise you the world for a couple percent, and they'll say, I'll do all this stuff for you. And they give you these terrible agreements for this. And one of the biggest things I've seen is when some of them go, I want 3%. And what that means is I want a non-dilutive 3%. Founders won't know what that means. And all of a sudden, you've just signed away an insane portion of your company, because every time you go to do something, they get free shares, right? So that's really, I'm trying to put the little fear of God, sharks in the water. That's when you want to have someone there. The other one is if you're more of a CPG style company that's producing something, those co-manufacturers, the co-packers, all of them, they are very well established, and they will say that their contract is take it or leave it. I will tell you it is not. So that is when you need somebody there, because once again, that is where, if you aren't prepared for it, you will accidentally give up a lot of percentage, a lot of profits, because one contract sounds fine, couple percent, second, third, fourth, all of a sudden it's all gone.
Yeah. And it adds up pretty quick, right?
Yes.
What's a example of a term sheet that's, I'm trying to think of the word. What's, snipe? No. I don't want to use the word horrific, but what's something that's super sharky?
Yes.
What's an example of something you've seen where a founder signs something that's basically hey, he gets 10x return before it? I don't know if anyone actually does that, but that's
I have seen a term sheet that said that the person, the company that was supposed to be the lead investor. So in preferred stock rounds, there is a lead investor who typically puts in at least half of the round, or a controlling percentage should be the big dog that gets to negotiate and stuff. This lead investor was basically a broker and said, I'm not going to promise you any amount of money. I'm going to do this term sheet, and then I will go out and shop it. But no matter how much money I bring in, I get a guaranteed board seat, and there's a NVCA term sheet, which is a very standard one that everyone starts off of. They took every shareholder protection and cut it and moved it to a new section that just said their rights. Didn't matter how much shares they owned. That was their rights. They then created new ones that I've never read before. All of this. And so when I got on the phone with them, they sent this to my client. And I got on the phone with them. I go, so if you raise $1, you get all this? And the guy looked me dead in the eyes like, yeah. Okay, why? And as soon as I said why, he goes, because we'll try. And I was like, man, I really wish that was my job. And so, but someone with a very good business in terms of, I assume they have a lot of money or a lot of connections, really put this together and gave it to my guy. And so that brought me to a new low of what I've seen people do. Okay. And so because of that, I'm like, you can't assume that this term sheet is negotiated or anywhere near your best interest when it shows up at your desk.
Yeah. And I think having someone who's looking out for your interests is very important, because to your point, when a founder is desperate's the wrong word to use, but when they're on the grind, nothing's working for them, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, you want to run towards that light. And maybe that's make or break for your company. But if you sort of leave everything out on the table, you lose all negotiation power. And now you're signing 3x, 4x. And then when there is liquidity, you see nothing, because you made decisions, you made emotional decisions, you signed term sheets, you didn't truly understand. There was no one looking out for your exit potential, because I've heard stories of, I've had some seniors from my high school who were kicked out of companies because they had a medical condition. And so the co-founder convinced their investors that, hey, let's sign this term sheet, but let's add a clause that this guy has to leave because of so-and-so, and he didn't disclose it. And I was like, that's so, it's so, I'm trying to think of a word. I can't think of a word, but no one was looking out for them. No one was on the founder side looking out for them. Right. No one was signing these arrangements, because at the end of the day, it's a business, and the people who invest in it are going to look for the business interest. So if that means kicking you out, you're going to be kicked out, right?
So that's one of the benefits I have as being the company's attorney. And that's another, we can kind of cut to like, one thing is some founders believe that the attorney is their attorney, but they have to realize they're not.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it all goes well and everyone's aligned. But one of my actual best parts that I get to do is when I am the company's attorney, I can say what is best for the company.
Yeah.
But when the founder is 90%, I do get to coach them a lot. Like usually I don't need to tell them they need their own full representation a lot of times, but I can tell them, this is what's good for the company and whatnot. One of the other things that we do at that term sheet stage, though, is that, like you said, a lot of these are first-time founders. They are seeing big dollar signs, and they go, I'll deal with the rest of it when I get to it. I have seen dozens of the rest of it. So I can tell them why, like you said, a 1.5 times liquidation as opposed to a 1 times liquidation can lead to common getting nothing. I have seen exits that were very successful and exits that they barely scraped by. And all I can tell you is no one is willing to see that number that they actually get. Even at the best exits, they see the number and they go, really, I get that little? The number, the PR release says this
100 million.
And I get this. I go, I've showed you the waterfall. They go, oh, I know. I just didn't know as I went through, right? So that's one of the things I've really learned over the last couple of years has been to not just be the yes man who wants to see the financing go well because my client needs the money. I want the legal work, is so truly make them realize here's a model, and you get to see as you raise what you're going to get and what you're going to lose, because they don't have that job in startups.
Yeah.
No one is a fractional exit modeler except for the lawyers. So until they get a real finance guy who's probably been through it before, that's one of the harder things I think that a lot of founders don't have. And so even not just legal help, I think that they need someone in their court that will guide them through funding and dilution and show them like, sure, this is good for you right now, but this is what's going to happen in the Series A or the Series B. Yeah. That's something that is really demystified to people inside. But when you aren't inside, you just see number go up and you don't see what happens for that number.
I was just making a note of a potential tool idea where visualizing what this looks like, right? So I think for a founder being like, oh, I sell for 100 million, here's my cap table, and it will show you here's what you make, right? And I don't think, and I was just like, oh, that would be a pretty like nifty tool to put together. And like
it would, because Carta sells it at way too high. So Carta made one of those, but it's in their like highest tier, and I have my own. So when I have clients come in, I have an Excel sheet that's like a cap table light for them until they want to start paying for stuff. And I built a model tool in there for that same reason. So I can go, you can sit there and plug in numbers, but still people just, especially in safe rounds, convertible note rounds, they just run around and they shop those and they just bring money in. And you have to realize that like, hey, that's a whole other topic of like, your company will grow. You need to believe in it. So you don't need all the money month one, when if you just got the amount of money you wanted to make it to month 4 and then raised again, your company would be worth double or triple.
Yeah.
Too many people think they need to do these huge
pre-seed
rounds. And all that's doing is causing a larger bet from both sides.
I think that's also partially to blame for social media, where a $2 million seed is not as glorified as a $10 million seed. And you want to be the $10 million seed because cloud, blah, blah, right? And so I think that's I think that's part of the reason why the VC game is sort of, you're working towards a goal that may not be what you want.
Yes.
But success is raising those big rounds, getting those valuations. I personally, if I have a $1 million, $2 million ARR business, I'm doing 20, 30% margins, I'm pretty happy. I would rather do that and try to do 2 of those or 3 of those instead of trying to raise 10 and go to billion, right? Because, I mean, what is it worth? Like, is it worth the pressure? Because I think there's this fiduciary duty that comes in when you take someone's money that you can't sort of wing it. I can't take a month off. I can't sort of be slow. I have to like month over month growth, year over year, and all that. Like, too much pressure, I feel.
That is a huge thing I've seen over my career, is the loss of control. Like, I've had, and they're great clients and they succeeded, and that's why, but I've finally had a founder truly be like, I want out of my current company because I loved when it was my company, and now I can't go to the bathroom without getting board consent.
Yeah.
Like, and I've seen that, and I was truly feeling for them, because they went, that was fun, and before I knew it, because it's incremental, right? It's death by 1,000 cuts. You just keep doing this. All of a sudden, it's not what you were doing.
Yeah.
And I work with a lot of consumer packaged goods that once they start doing a decent business and turning a profit, and they try to come up to me like they want to be in the VC game, I go, you're running a good business. Like, what if you just kind of stopped, slowed down, and think, hey, I'm running a company. Like, you don't have to make it a billionaire and sell it and exit. And like you said, I really think the LinkedIn success stories, multiple entrepreneur stories, really distresses people from wanting to do what they're actually doing, and they just want the outcome. And now they're just a widget seller, and they don't care about the product. They don't care about the business.
And I think part of that is success in the space is seen as those big things. No one highlights a person making $1 million, $2 million a year, bootstrapped, owns 100% of the company. No one looks at that and says, oh my God, look at this guy. Look at what he's doing, right? And those aren't highlighted enough. And I think that's partially to blame for people wanting to raise these big rounds. But, I mean, I can't change the industry. So
yeah, that's
an opinion.
I really wish, the term like small business wasn't, like, I hate the words high growth.
Yeah.
High growth just means in the VC game, and that's all you're looking for. I'm like, no, we should be caring about the business that's actually being created. Is it turning profits? Not just how can we explode it? And I agree. And so I think, once again, I think one of my like half therapy coaching sessions of my like legal work with them is keeping them aligned with that, is keeping them aligned that this money, and one of my favorite things is some founders see that money and they go, because of this, I can expand. Because of this, I can do this. And they know why they need it, and they're excited. And I'm like, they're going down the right path. I have some clients that raise it and they immediately go, we need to go to the next raise, next raise. I go, then what was it for? What was the money for? Like, we need to recontextualize.
You're constantly working towards a raise.
Yes.
You're not working towards providing value, building a product, making money. You're like, I got to hit this number so I can raise another round to last another 4 months.
Yeah.
And then once you raise that, I got to hit this number so I raise another round. I'm like, why?
Yeah, and that's the thing is I've met more and more CPG founders who are like, I don't want to do that part. And I go, yeah, so you want to run a small business. That's cool. Like, we can do I love that because I'm like, I can do that. Whereas some law firms would probably kick you out right there because they go, oh, what, we're not going to get 8 finances out of you? No, get out of here. I'm like, no, I want to help these smaller businesses and really let them know, like, yeah, you don't need money right away. You can be happy with what you're doing. And also, I feel like it's very interesting because we saw such a dip in VC deals from 2022, 2024. But I remember in early 2020 when it was term sheets every week, everyone was printing money. I was all up in there. And then when you realize that people had to start telling VCs why they needed the money, they didn't know how to do that at that point. And so I think hopefully that has reset it a little bit.
Yeah. And I think story that came to mind, I knew this friend who went to YC, and he talked to one of the principals, like, what you're building right now could get up to 60 million ARR, but we don't want that. Do AI, and let's see if you can do a unicorn $1 billion company, because it's either that. I would rather you try that and go to zero than stay on your path without AI and do 60 million. We don't care about that. And so I was like, I feel like that's the wrong advice or picture to paint, because these two founders who've been grinding on 50K a year salaries, a future where you're doing 60 million a year is a very nice future. Yeah. But now this big behemoth in the industry has said, oh, that's worthless. Mm-hmm. Do unicorn or zero. I feel like that's the wrong story to paint. But that's what YC wants. And great, that's what YC needs is unicorns or nothing, right? But for those two founders, they're like, no, I think we're fine with a $50 million company, because it'll be their first big thing, right? And I think that dynamic is what people get wrong, right? Mm-hmm. They go to VC thinking, I want this, but you don't understand that the VC has its own numbers and metrics, right? So if you want to raise that, be aware that they're going to push their narrative on you. And if you're not aligned from day one, there's going to be constant battle, right? And being very clear with what you're getting into.
That's what I wish in terms of, I provide a lot of legal just education, and I'm trying to work like doing things like this to like push some things. VCs don't, because that's what they don't tell people, right? Is that like when you do finance and you learn more about it, you realize, yes, that money isn't free. They bring it in and it needs to do so much work over so many years, and then you pull it out, right? So all of a sudden, when you're in bed with them, they have a run rate for your company that might not align with you. Like you said, the amount of times people get pushed to exit or pushed to take these risks because they need to either do that, it's really unfair, and that gets them off their company, because as you said, that VC needs $1 billion or bust because it's right off or they make all their money. But you just want to run a cool company, and if you want to run a cool company that's making that much money, that's still an imaginary amount of money. That's pretty awesome. And if you, like you said, if you don't have to dilute it and you just run a company that's doing that well, you're going to be way happier.
Yeah. I think another dynamic is like, think about like funds are normally 7 years or 8 years or whatever. So if they're in year 3 of the fund, they have 4 years. So think about, your timeline is now not 7 years. For you, it's 4. Maybe you have 5, whatever. I don't know how the nitty gritty works, but I think a lot of people don't think about it to that level. Like if they write a check year 5 in a company, they're expecting you to give some exit in 2 years, right? Because they want to close the fund, start it, and start another fund, right, or whatever. But I think people don't look that deep. They're like, oh, great, I got a check. I have time. I'm like, no, there's going to be pressure. I met a founder in SF, and he was talking about, he was the CEO, CPO. He knew the product. He knew the customers. His board was like, you need to hire a CPO. He's like, no, I'm the CEO. Like, I understand this. Like, no, trust us. Like, okay. They went staffing firm, paid them $120K, paid the CPO $300K. He comes back 2 months later. He's like, it's not working out. It's not the same thing. And they're like, give it time. And so he comes back. It's like, still not working. They're like, okay, we'll make a decision to do, like, work with him, try to see if you can work with the CPO. And then didn't work out. CPO wasn't on the same bandwidth. They were just not like on the same page about what to do. Fired the CPO. But the board delayed it so much that the staffing agency was like, hey, you have 6 months. and if it doesn't work in 6 months, we'll find you a new one. But because of the board decision, it ended up being after 6 months. So now he lost $500,000 trying out a narrative the board was pushing, but he always knew was the wrong decision. And now in that scenario, I'm like, why is this dynamic even created in the first place? Maybe the people on the board were wrong. Maybe the way the board was set up was not lucrative. Maybe it was too, I don't know, whatever structure. Right? I'm hypothesizing a lot. But I feel like that situation could have been prevented. You lost $500,000. You lost 6 months of time. You could have done so much in those 6 months with that $500,000. But because of this VC dynamic, the board, you were pressured into a path that maybe could have a lot of tertiary effects. You have no idea. But I feel like there's stories like that people don't talk about.
Yeah, the control of your board is a huge thing. I have seen, once again, so people start with just the founder, and then you add in maybe the first investor. Like the lead investors typically come in as board members, and typically the old one stays until it gets to a certain size, and then the fight becomes the founder tries to keep either independent, or they get to just or they get to designate. So they try to keep the board to where no matter what, if they go, no, I need this to happen, they truly can outvote the preferred stock directors.
Yeah.
As soon as you lose that, it's not your company anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the situation right there, right? When you truly need to pitch for the board, it's not your company anymore. And now this is the dumbest example, but if any founders here play video games, you need to play this game called Triangle Strategy, where it is a RPG where you're the king and you choose what you need to do. There's tough decisions, but you don't get to make them. You have 6 people and you have to convince them. And so even though you're the one playing the video game and you want to go say do A, your people will vote B and you have to go do it. And that feeling you have right there, but I wanted to do the A thing and now the game's making me, that feeling, I had that when I played that game. I went, that's what it's going to feel like as soon as the founder realizes it's not free choice and free will.
Yeah.
And so it's terrifying when that happens because it goes from what do I think's best for the company to what do I think I have to tell these people to do what I want to do.
Yeah. And the reason I find that sort of a weird dynamic is I was in a startup for a year, raised 16 million. And I felt like every month we were always working towards the board deck. And I don't know if that's the right thing or the wrong thing to work towards. But when you have a product, customers, people using it, I feel like what you should be working towards is making that problem better, upselling, increasing revenue. But we're always working towards what's the right story to tell on the board deck. And I've never done this myself, so I'm the wrong person to even have an opinion about this. But sometimes I feel like that forces decisions and forces features and forces actions in the company that make the deck look good. Versus we could have spent an extra week and made this better, but you missed the board presentation. And so I feel like, I don't know if that's the right thing or wrong thing to work towards, but I feel like that kind of pressure, understanding that that's a situation you're probably going to be in after a certain number of raises and certain number of capital. But no one talks about that. No one tells you that that's what your life is going to be, is prepping for this board meeting every 4 weeks. You got to prep for the meeting. If you don't like being in front of that audience and that pressure and that, maybe rethink about when and how you raise board VC money. Maybe think about when and how you set up a board and who's on your board and stuff like that.
And that is something that I don't know if the logical extreme becomes higher, not even this is the CEO role, but higher the like new founder role where it's like, I want to keep building and loving and being the evangelist and loving the business.
Like you be my PR person.
You go deal with the board. Honestly, because that is, like you said, that's a whole other job. It takes up all your time and effort. You're doing politics. Like I have a client that has grown to have 200 people on the cap table, many of them preferred stock. They've gone through 6 raises and had over like 200 million in that. The amount that they have to think, oh, well, we got to talk to this guy about this, and we got to talk about this. And even though this person doesn't have voting rights, if we don't talk to them, they're going to be pissed. It is insane to listen to that in the sense that, like,
200.
That's the job now. The job is you are basically you are hosting a community within your company of people that you just have to keep happy. That's an entire job. Like, I'm good. So yeah, I think that's one of the things is bringing it back down to kind of practical legal advice. Keep your cap table lean. I mean, I get that you want a lot of people throwing you checks, especially in these. I think convertible notes and safes, I think Y Combinator ruined things with the safe in the sense that these founders think that they can download this document, fill in 2 blanks, and run. And they don't realize, like I said, that maybe they're raising on the wrong number. They're getting too many people in, and it's going to bloat everything up. I think that's a real fear. And then one of the other things with that, as like kind of a warning, is when you raise on these safes and notes and you keep doing it and you keep doing it, when you eventually need a preferred stock financing, that preferred stock lead investor, as we talked about earlier, needs to be the majority or the big dog in it. Now, if you've raised too much money on safes, you can't find a lead investor that can dwarf the safes. So no lead investor is going to want to come in if once the safes convert, they get control of the company. So I've had founders get stuck because they raised too much during bridge rounds, and they couldn't find someone to beat those bridge round people.
How much should a bridge round? I have no idea. I don't even know what a bridge round is.
So that's just the fact that they're bringing in so it's the idea, like, say you did a Series A and then you
needed some cash.
Yes, you don't have enough to get to B, so you do these safes and
got it.
But
okay.
A lot of for me, it's more a bloated pre-seed round where you keep bringing in checks every time, and all of a sudden you have $1 million in safes, and your company's only valued at like 10 to 15, and you can't find an investor to bring in more than that million to be the lead investor without losing all your dilution right now. So now you're in a weirdly unmarketable spot.
Got it.
Where you either have to go back to those safes and try to ask them to lower their cap, lower their discount, which they have no need to do, or you have to magically get your company now to a 40 million valuation, something like that. So that's a real sticking point that, once again, I have never seen an article about that. I've had multiple founders get to that point or almost get to that point. I've never once seen someone warn people on Y Combinator's site, even in their little user guide, of like, maybe don't do these for 2 years before you do. There should be, because safes don't have a maturity date. They don't have interest. People think they're free money, and they're really dangerous.
Quick segment. And I don't know if we can cover this in time, but could you just roughly cover the different kinds of stock and who gets what?
Sure. That's a great question, because common stock is what starts the company.
Okay.
That is the typical, you get 1 vote, that equals the percentage of ownership. That's what the founders have, and that's what they give out to their early advisors and whatnot. That is the base level. You then have preferred stock, which gets created by contract, not by state law, essentially. So state law governs the common stock. The preferred stock is what the investors get, and it sits above common stock. And the rights they get above common stock come from the documents they sign.
Got it.
So that is what the NVCA documents, the voting agreement.
Those define what these rights are. Yeah.
So none of them are ever the same. So some of them could have 2x liquidation preference, which means they get paid twice as much. Some of them, they can get paid and then they convert into common, and they also get what the common get. All of that is a miasma that is fought over during the preferred stock financing and term sheets. So that is why a lot of founders don't realize that it is good to have a 2 to 3 week term sheet negotiation stage, because all of this gets defined at that point, and it's not so simple.
Makes sense.
So that's what happens with preferred stock, and then that's really it. But some founders get creative. Common stock, you can split into classes.
I was going to ask.
And then you can put voting rights, non-voting rights. All of that, it can happen, right? It's a little over-engineering sometimes, but you can do that. And
can you have as many classes as you want?
Yes.
Or okay.
So what happens, so that's the 2 big ones, is common and preferred. And then each time you raise another round, that preferred stock wants to be somewhere above the previous one, or they match, different things like that. So they could have higher liquidation preferences. They could have special voting rights that the other one doesn't. So what I tell people is you have to fight as hard as you can against your Series A, because the Series B will get all the A gets and more. Series C gets all what B gets and more.
Got it.
And so I see people cave on things. I go, you can't cave now. You can't, because if you're going to raise again, and I will tell you, like, I've seen multiple exits of good companies have 0 go to common, and they weren't horrendous term sheets and horrendous preferred stock. It is just how the waterfall works. And so you have to protect not only yourself, because you have a huge chunk of common, you have to protect the advisors, the employees. I've seen too many employee option plans not get paid out. So that's the thing I really tell people is like the VC, like you said, they're not on your side. The VC is not on the employee side, because once their preferred stock is above them, they don't care.
Yeah.
So you need to be the person, the true champion of the common stock. That is a role that you're going to have, not just for you because you're going to get a sweet exit package or you're going to go with the company when it gets acquired. You can't leave the employees in the dust.
Makes
and that's
sense.
a big thing.
One thing I've always questioned or maybe never understood, as a founder, why can't I have preferred stock?
So you can. So one of the things I have been pushing for founders to do, and it's a whole like VC hates this kind of thing, is that founders are told that they need to just put in their own money into the company because they have to. They have to bootstrap and they throw money in. I've been telling people they can actually put that as a convertible note and put money into the company and keep it on track as a convertible note against the company. And so that way, when that first conversion happens, you get preferred stock. You'll be an investor just like the rest. At each round, you might say, hey, at that price that was determined by that third party, maybe you buy
Get some
in as well, but
liquidity,
you buy in, you do that. You can't be gifted it. I know that's a tax thing above my head of like, they can't say, hey, we're doing this preferred round, and instead of giving the founder another option grant, we're going to grant them preferred. That just doesn't work. But you can try to get in there as an investor or have some skin in the game. You're just probably not going to have enough to really make it matter. More so the thing is that the founder needs to realize that they're kind of like we said, even if you have 90% of your common stock, if the waterfall eats everything before it gets the common, it's worthless. So you need to fight for yourself and your common stockholders as the common stock kind of champion to make sure it makes it through the waterfall. I think that's kind of the bigger concern I have for founders.
Is it possible to walk through a very simple example scenario of, let's say, common stock, preferred stock, 1x, preferred stock, 2x liquidation? Just to make anyone listening understand, what does that liquidation preference mean?
Yeah.
And then what it would mean for common stock. I don't know if it's possible to like have a very simple example.
Yeah, we'll do a really fast one.
Yeah.
You hear the big number, $40 million exit.
Yeah.
Okay. So that you take that $40 million number, and then you immediately have to use that money to close out. So this is for, say, a true exit. Some company is buying your company and they just want to take over the thing. You have to take that $40 million and you have to use you're probably cash negative or zero, and that's how these startups work. So immediately you have to spend that $40 million on all your employees, all your debt, all your contracts, everything. So
and debt is always at the top, right? Is my understanding?
Yes.
Got it.
So like
Okay, yeah.
that, your legal fees, your broker, their legal fees. So I mean, people don't realize how much that number gets lopped immediately because they don't think of, oh yeah, well, all these employees have their salary. We have the lights. We have to get out of this lease now, all that, right? So that eats up a pretty big chunk. Then you do the waterfall. So as I said, like debt is first. And that could be hard bank debt. It could be convertible notes that didn't get paid out yet, something like that. Then you have the first round of preferred stock. When you have non-participating liquidation preferences, what that says is, say I bought that preferred stock at $5 a share. The liquidation preference is just that $5 times the liquidation preference.
Got it.
And I have to get that money before anything passes by me to go lower. So if it's 1x, those investors get their money back simply.
Yeah.
They just get their money back, and that's where they are. But every time you add anything above 1x, that is a guaranteed return for the investor. So if it's 1.5, they are guaranteed $7.50 per share before the money pushes down.
Got it.
That's the big killer, because multiple rounds of that obviously eats it up. Because what you want to
And this is a liquidation preference on what their input or buy price was.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
What their buy price was. So obviously the buy price should increase every round with that, right? So it goes down this waterfall.
And it goes from the latest round first.
It depends. Okay. They can fight to be above them in the waterfall or equal. That's a big leverage thing, right? So, but what happens next is if it's, say you got them all to say 1x, usually what happens is they all will do their 1x liquidation. They all get paid their
Money back.
and then their shares convert into common.
Got it.
And then all of common shares the rest.
Got it.
So if not, they just get their preferred and then they're out and then it goes to common.
In this conversion, are there any multipliers on the conversion? Let's say I bought 10 stocks and I got paid out my liquidation preference. I just have 10 common stock, or is there any scenario where I could now have 100 common stock?
I've not seen a multiplier, but they could probably do that.
Okay, sweet.
So what would happen is, say those shares all get paid out and then they jump down back into the common pool, and then you simply take the number that's left over and you put it into the common. That's what happens, right? So I'll give you.
So in an example, let's say there's 100 shares left in common and there's 10 million left to pay out.
Yeah.
So it'd just be 10 million by 100.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So very simple. So then it doesn't matter on what their buy price was or anything. Every common just shares it. So one of the big concerns, though, is that if preferred eats up a lot of the
Capital,
and then the founders are getting exit bonuses or grants into the new company or just nice salaries there, they'll take that and they won't fight to make sure that the equity plan gets paid out, equity plan gets canceled, advisors, anyone with those kind of low percentage. So what I will tell people is I want more often than not, and you can do this because this is all contractual, you can just say, I don't care that they had common, I want to carve out something to pay all the employees as if they would have gotten this, something like that. Like there needs... Without that, I'm telling you, like, waterfall drains real fast. But that's how it works. So that's how you want to think about when you create that preferred stock wall, you are truly creating a contractual dam before anything gets to you and the rest of the common.
Makes sense. That's why when you do 2x, 3x preference, someone gave you $1 million, they're getting 2 back.
Yes.
Right? So if you're selling for 3,
that's it.
Like, so I think, like you're saying, a lot of people don't think 5-10 years down, because you don't even know, do you want to exit, do you not want to exit, do you want to get bought out, do you want to liquidate, do you want to, and then we haven't even talked about secondaries, and there's like a whole other like section to this, right? But I think understanding your end goal, understanding what a potential path could look like, I'm not saying go understand the term sheet, but it'll at least help you question the term sheet, right? Because if you don't even know what to question, because in your mind, you own 90% of a company. So you feel like, yeah, I should make something, right? Because simple maths. I sell for $1 million. I own 90% of the company. I should make 900K. And when you only make 100, you're like, wait, what happened? And I think not questioning itself is probably part of the problem. But also, I feel like founders don't like talking about money and don't like talking about who owns how much and what did I raise at. I've never seen this. Again, I've never raised, so I'm not the right person to like make this judgment. But I don't see founders talking about how much they raised, what the term sheet was. I don't see founders sharing this information. I don't see founders sharing how they do ESOP grants, and I don't see founders sharing, hey, I brought in a CTO, I gave him 1.5%, 2.5%, 3%. Like, I don't see a lot of people openly sharing this information. So where are you gonna get references? I don't know.
And that's a big issue, is that so much of this has to be confidential because they make it that way. So like all these are signed under NDA and stuff, but it does. But like you said, to the discredit, it's the same thing as like hiding wages in companies, which you've known forever. It helps the company, not the individuals, right? VCs don't want people sharing that because then if the founders know what's market, they'll fight harder. That's where I come in as the true, not only just like legal consultation, but the person who has seen 100 deals and can tell you without having to do the specifics and anything like that of like, no, this isn't market and this isn't market, because
I didn't know people were made to sign NDAs for terms.
The information is still disseminated by VCs, big law firms, which I'm glad that they put some information out, but you have to remember the skew of it, and it is that they are on the other side of the table.
100%.
Not negotiable. I'm like, yes, it is crazy. And so that's one of the biggest things is like, you should ask, backed events, find events of founders that aren't being backed by a big thing, and they're probably gonna be a little bit more open to talk, because it's all popularity contests. Like, you do need a place to share and open up, because it's only a negative that we don't have that. And I see that all the time, which is when I give people the information I have and they are so appreciative of it because it doesn't sound like what they were told by the investor. I go, yes, because the investor wins every step you don't take against them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like someone told me this. I don't know where I've heard this, or maybe it's a pretty popular story. This guy was working on the factory floor of his own company. He got injured. And then there's a whole case about how he had a company attorney because he was supposed to get like wages, FMLA, like he was supposed to get compensated for being injured on the work floor. Mm-hmm. And then he hired his own attorney. So as the CEO of a company, he would first sit with the company attorney and then talk about how to handle this case. Then the company attorney would go out, and then his personal attorney would come in and then be like, okay, so what are we, because he was basically fighting himself.
Right.
But he ended up winning the case and he got a settlement. And then the IRS like said, oh no, that's tax fraud. And then he fought that whole thing. And then he's like, no, it isn't. And then he won and he ended up getting, I don't know. I want to say it's a popular story. I can't remember the name of this person. But it's pretty old story. And I think it comes down to what you're saying of like company interest, your personal interest. You need someone, even if you're working in the company's favor, you got to always think about, okay, what is it in for me? In those scenarios, like you said, the model you have, okay, I will fight for these preferred shares. I'll do this. I'll do that. What does it mean for me? Why are you building the company? Why are you doing this? Like, not everyone's super philanthropic all the time where, oh yeah, I'm just doing this for the good of whatever, right? Like, at the end of the day, you want some outcome. You want some payday. You want something out of this. And who is fighting for that? I don't know, right? And so I think it's not talked about enough, but...
Yeah, I think founders, I would say once you're at like, this is a very broad rule of thumb, but once you have one or two board members that aren't in your pocket in the sense that they are truly director, I would say, yeah, you want to start maybe having someone that's only on your team because, as you just said, like the company will have to start making decisions for the company. Yeah. And you are once you get to that, you're
an employee.
You're actually adverse to the companies in certain ways. Not adverse to its goal or anything, but you want more from it than it wants to give you.
100%. Yeah.
And I'm all for them to do that. I wish more of my more mature clients had someone had a personal attorney that wasn't trying to fight everything, but I would just feel more comfortable that someone told them, look, this is what they're getting from you because I can't do both. Just like
makes
that.
Sense. Yeah, makes sense. Again, for anyone listening, all of my opinions are based on people I know. I have not yet once raised money and not actually done this. So these are opinions just based on friends and family and people who tell me stuff, right? I do a couple of things at the end. I'll ask you a bunch of rapid fire questions.
Awesome.
But one thing I would like every guest to ask to tell me is, what are 3 resources that you'd recommend to someone starting out? And maybe if you want to stick to the legal landscape, that's fine. If not, just in general.
Yeah. So almost going against what I was saying about how this is disseminated from the bigger sides, but I would say there's certain websites, Cooley, they're big tier law firm, way too expensive for anyone that we're talking to, but they do put out a lot of stuff on their website, Cooley Go. I would say there is a new NDA called One NDA, and it is a kind of open source, fully agreed upon one. That's great if you just need something. And then for actual, founder discussion, my biggest resource is find the local one. Like we were just talking about. Okay. I know it's a little bit amorphous, like go and find a group because I'm telling people they need to get out of the imposter bias or syndrome of LinkedIn and those groups. And what I realized really quickly is when you go into these Slacks and groups, it's just posturing and you need to be vulnerable with people. So find that resource that's gonna be more valuable than anything else.
Nice. What's your support system? So I like asking guests, and maybe that's a more founder question, but you're in this journey, you went solo, you're building, you do a bunch of esports stuff. I know you're co-hosting the esport thing with Justin. What's your support system? What allows you to build this, help founders, and sort of go on this solo journey?
Yeah, so I was lucky that I was the first person in my entire family to go to college, let alone law school with all my stuff. So basically, anything I was doing, my family was just like, "That's cool, you're doing well." So I had that always going for me. That I didn't have this pressure of where I was going to go. So my family is actually a really good resource for that. My dad has run a small business. He ran one, sold it to retire when me and my brother were kids, and then built another one once we grew up a bit. So I got to watch true small business grow. And so once again, I can always talk to him about like growing this business, doing it as an actual entity, and have someone be like, yeah, I went through going to the office, sitting there, no phone call rings, go, okay, and leave, and nothing. So like, I have someone who can really talk me through all of that.
Nice.
And my girlfriend is great about this. She has been incredible when it comes to me going through all these changes. So I think I'm just lucky to have, especially in law, which is so risk averse, and the path is supposed to be so clear.
Yeah.
When I didn't take that path, I was glad I didn't have, like, say, 2 managing partner attorneys as parents who are like, you're failing us, or all my friends are still in big law. So I really was humbled by being in Austin, my friends, my support system, my family, to be able to take risks because I'm still doing very well.
Makes sense. I like that. I do this bit every episode where I'll ask you a question for my previous guest.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you for one question for whoever my next guest is. But your question is, what is your why?
So mine's actually pretty easy for why I decided to do this, which is that I never truly wanted to work in a law firm because of, as I said, I didn't even know what it was going to be like. I went into it, didn't really like having lawyers above me.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I started my own company, small little startup, grew it for 4 years and sold it. The person I realized that was the coolest person in the room was the attorney who had done it before and gets to just solve problems. That was my why, is like, I realized that people make really cool things and they don't want to do the boring part that also has a lot of value. I want to be the person that lets content creators, founders, just focus on the fun part, and then I get to help build that and problem solve and keep them creating what they're the best at. So that's my why for why I love this.
I like that. And I like that it comes from a point of view of where you did it, you've been through the journey, so you're not just someone who's read the textbooks and is sort of telling someone, hey, do this, right? You can also relate to sort of the emotional side of that, because I feel like being a founder has a lot of emotions, and sort of when you sit with someone like, go do this, it's always like, why are you qualified to tell me this, right? It's like when I see a VC who's just like a Stanford grad and is writing a check, I feel like that person doesn't truly understand what the other person is facing with building a company, because there's so many factors that go into this journey, so many people so many sacrifices that person's probably made, but that guy has never understood it. So he's trying to haggle with this person, like, term sheet, this, that, but you don't understand that plot. You don't understand that emotional journey. And sometimes it's hard for people. They just burn out. They'll just give up and like do whatever you want them to do. And I feel like you being from the other side is a good spot to be in, because you can probably sympathize with.
And I am right now. That's a big thing. It's always funny that everyone's telling like, oh, I'm a service provider. They go, no. When it says no service providers, you're also a founder because you're solo. And like I was talking to all these founders, and same thing. It's like, why am I sitting at this job that's a cushy salary telling me to extract more value from them when I could be in the trenches with them, and it's a win-win? And that's why I did this.
Yeah. On my flight over to Austin, I was sitting next to this guy who was a buyer at a private jet company. And I asked him, why'd you leave? He's like, management wanted me to penalize the engine manufacturers for delivering a week late when the plane was 3 years away from even being certified. And he's like, one of those things of like, well, this guy's just running his business. Let him like run his, and he's on time. Like a week, if you're on deadlines, fine, it matters. But the plane's nowhere near even going to production. And you're making me go and like hound this manufacturing company for something that doesn't even affect our business, right? And so it's one of those things of like, you don't know what that engine manufacturer is going through. They probably have a ton of shit going on. If they affected you, fine, great, they're on the hook. But it didn't really affect you. Why are you making such a big... And so it's small stuff like that that I feel people on the other side who haven't been through the journey don't sympathize with. But.
Exactly. It's just money. That's the thing. They don't remember
100%,
that it's
yeah.
hard to earn when you're not at a big company with a salary.
Yeah.
It really is. Once you're not being paid by a big company, every dollar is actually earned. And I think that's a huge thing that people need to remember.
100%. What's your question for my next guest?
I would say, and this is kind of would be fun for a founder, is what would be the parachute to get you out of this whole situation? After going through it, if you were told, hey, is it either a stable job or moving somewhere else, what has been kind of the not just sellout, but I do want out of this? Have you ever thought of that? The idea is not, it could be monetary based. I'm trying to think of a better way to put it, is what would be your ripcord of, yes, I am actually done with this. It's time to go. It could be having another kid. It could be something like that. I'm just always curious where, like you just said, where's someone's breaking point where we are taking so many risks. Is there something that would make you stop taking them?
Got it. Okay, sweet. I like that.
I think it's important for founders to hear, once you dive in, you don't have to go to zero and bust, right? There might be people who have had successful careers trying it, going back to the real world, the corporate world, and that's not failure. I would love for more people to hear that story.
100%. And I think it's also realizing that you tried, you had the passion. Maybe you're not ready for it right now. Maybe there's others. Like, you have 2 kids. You can't be making $40K a year and sort of like providing properly for 2 kids, right? But I think that is also learning journey growth.
Right.
And maybe you come back to it in 4 years or 5 years. But if you never did it, you would never know. You'd always be like, but like,
Yeah.
Sweet. But that's all I had for you. What do you want to plug? Where should people reach out? Anything you have to offer to anyone listening?
Yeah, so website's Elazab Legal, again,
We'll link everything,
ELAZAB. And then what I would say is if anyone says that they have seen me on this show and they want to reach out, usually I do like about a 15 to 20 minute consultation to see what they can do. But if you come from the show, I will extend that and really give you that kind of roadmap to what you can do and what to expect. So I would say, let's do something like 40 and actually sit down, get through a little bit of stuff. Obviously can't give legal advice until I'm engaged, but I will sit down for a little bit longer.
Point you in the right direction.
Put you into more of a yes, exactly.
Nice. Sweet. And we'll link everything, but I appreciate you coming on, and I think there's a lot of stuff that we can take away from this episode, but really appreciate the insights.
Of course, yeah. I was so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.